Well, look, I ran on this, and the people want me to find it. And I've had a great help with Elon Musk, who's been terrific. He comes in with 100 of very smart people. You know, it started off with 12, then it went to 15, then it went to 25, then it went to 50, and everybody wants to join. And I guess you have to have an IQ of about 175 at least to do it. They're a smart group of people. They don't dress as well as you or maybe me, but they are smart. And they go in there and they talk to people, and the people get all tongue-tied because they have no idea. You know, nobody thought this would be caught. And
so you'll fight this in court, but how does it work with Elon day to day? Does he come in and say, this is what I'm working on? Does he say, here's what we're doing?
First of all, he's a great guy. He was never really a supporter or not a supporter. He was a sort of semi-neutral kind of a guy, not a political person, very smart, a brilliant person, and which I like. I'm a big believer in IQ points. I mean, it's a good thing. And I've gotten to know him a little bit over the last couple of years. During the campaign, he liked what I said. He went to Pennsylvania. He actually campaigned right after the rocket ship went up, where he caught it coming down, which nobody saw before. He then took off. He went to Pennsylvania. He actually campaigned for me and did a very good job. I won Pennsylvania by a lot. I won everything by a lot. But Elon, I'd say go in here because USAID, I heard very bad things about for years. I mean, you did too. I mean, I'm sure you did too.
Meanwhile, now the disruptor in chief, Elon Musk, who apparently has adopted the alias, at least he changed his social media handle to Harry Balls, tweeted this morning, democracy in America is being destroyed by judicial coup. An activist judge is not a real judge.
What's up, y'all? Gerald here, creator of Gospel Chops and your host for this YouTube channel, back with another video. Now, y'all, Donald Trump is doing amazing things, he and his administration, as they continue to get confirmed, with RFK Jr. just being confirmed a few hours ago. Y'all, it is incredible what is happening right before our eyes. But even as good as it is to people like me who observe it from a certain perch, it is driving Democrats crazy. They don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. They're coming out here in front of news cameras, making fools of themselves, not only in front of the cameras, but in different governmental departments. Y'all, they are holding news conferences. I don't know what the intent is, but I know what the result is. The result is that they just end up looking foolish, saying foolish things, standing on foolish principles, standing on things that you and I probably believe are un-American. Well, y'all, they have latched onto this narrative of a constitutional crisis. It's a constitutional crisis that Donald Trump is signing executive orders. Well, Joe Biden signed them. It is a constitutional crisis that Donald Trump is auditing certain departments. Well, they should have been audited years ago, generations ago. Y'all, there are certain things that are going on in government right now that are making me question everything I ever believed about government, everything I ever learned about government from K through 12, even in college, taking history courses and studying this stuff, even in grad school. I had a con law professor tell me, she didn't just tell me, she told the whole class. On the first day of class, she said, we are going to explore the United States Constitution through the prism of gay marriage. I said, no, we not. Not we. We ain't doing it. You might do it, but I ain't doing it. So I've come to look at the Constitution in a certain way over my lifetime as my intellect and knowledge base has developed, and I've come to the conclusion that, okay, the separation of powers that is inherent in the Constitution is interpreted differently by different people. But let me simplify it for you. See, we got the executive branch, we got the legislative branch, we got the judicial branch. And everybody can get along on the playground as long as you don't get into my business, as long as I don't get into your business, as long as we can get together and we can do some things, but we don't get into their business. You understand, y'all? Keep your hands to yourself in governmental regards. Don't go sniffing around in other folks' business where you don't have jurisdiction. And here we have, during this constitutional crisis, a few rogue judges in places like Rhode Island, in places like Seattle, that have these little tiny districts who say, hey, I'm a little district court judge on this federal circuit, and I'm going to lay out a whole proclamation for the entire nation based on my judicial powers here in my little district. Well, I seem to recall Andrew Jackson back in the day when he received a Supreme Court, not just a district court, y'all, a Supreme Court ruling that he didn't agree with. And he said, listen, John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him come down here and enforce it. I love that posturing. Donald Trump has taken a different posture. He said, hey, we're going to abide by the courts. We're going to do whatever it is they say. We're going to appeal it. We're going to go through the process. Got to respect him for that. But at the same time, it frustrates people like me who believe that this president, along with the first buddy, Elon Musk, are going in the right direction. They're looking for ways to fraud and abuse and corruption in the government. And boy, are they finding it. Well, I wish, as I follow this presidential saga, we just 3 weeks in, y'all. We ain't even hit a month yet, but things are getting good. And as I follow it, I wish Donald Trump would take on that little spirit of Andrew Jackson. Now, I got some other problems with Andrew Jackson, but that doesn't cloud my judgment on this particular issue. I wish Donald Trump would take that posture and say, hey, I understand what the court said. I understand the ruling. But if you ain't got no army, you ain't got no Navy, you ain't got no Air Force and Marines to come down here in this White House, in this Oval Office and enforce it, boy, you just talking. Slam your gavel all you want. You are ineffectual here because you have overstepped your authority. And the executive branch has the authority. Even though the legislative branch might authorize funds for certain programs, if they fall under the purview of the executive branch has the authority to administer those funds that have been appropriated. So don't you come over here judicial and get to sticking your nose in presidential business.
We're 3 weeks into the second Trump presidency, 3 weeks, and tonight there are warnings that the U.S. is dangerously close to a constitutional crisis. Now, the first shoe on this dropped when a federal judge today said the White House is defying his order to unfreeze billions of dollars in federal aid, marking the first time that we've had a judge expressly accuse the Trump administration of ignoring a court ruling. And in a separate case today, federal employees here in Washington told a judge that the administration was defying another order by not reinstating workers who had been put on leave. Now, this all has prominent Democrats and many of the nation's top constitutional scholars declaring that the U.S. is on the brink of a reckoning. The Trump Justice Department says the president should have the authority to decide how to run the government and that these judges are overreaching. And some of the president's allies say the judges should not be judging any of the moves to shrink the federal government. That includes special government employee Elon Musk, who this weekend accused a judge who was blocking his Doge team from accessing Treasury Department systems of being corrupt, with Musk calling for the judge to be impeached. Vice President Vance is not going quite that far, but made clear where he sees the judiciary's limits, writing, "Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power." The question tonight, of course, is who determines what is legitimate power?
Mr. Musk,
I have to what?
including a lot of Democrats.
I have detractors?
You do, sir.
I don't believe it.
Say that you're orchestrating a hostile takeover of government and doing it in a non-transparent way. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, first of all, you couldn't ask for a stronger mandate from the public. And a lot of times, people that don't get what they voted for, but in this presidency, they are going to get what they voted for. And what are the two ingredients that are really necessary in order to cut the budget deficit in half from $2 trillion to $1 trillion? And it's really two things: competence and caring. And if you add competence and caring, you'll cut the budget deficit in half. And I fully expect to be scrutinized and get a daily proctology exam, basically. Might as well just camp out there. So it's not like I think I can get away with something. I'll be scrutinized nonstop. But with the support of the president, we can cut the budget deficit in half from $2 trillion to $1, and then with deregulation, because there's a lot of sort of regulations that don't ultimately serve the public good. We need to free the builders of America to build. And if we do that, that means I think we can get the economic growth to be maybe 3-4%, maybe 5%. And that means if you can get $1 trillion of economic growth and you cut the budget deficit by $1 trillion, between now and next year, there is no inflation. There's no inflation at 26. And if the government is not borrowing as much, it means that interest costs decline. So the mortgage, their car payment, their credit card bills, anything, their student debt, the monthly payments drop. That's a fantastic scenario for the average American. I mean, imagine they're going down the grocery aisle and the prices from one year to the next are the same, and their mortgage, all the debt payments dropped. How great is that for the average American?
Billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think it's very important. And that's one of the reasons I got elected. I say we're going to do that. Nobody had any idea it was that bad, that sick, and that corrupt. And it seems hard to believe that judges want to try and stop us from looking for corruption, especially when we found hundreds of millions of dollars worth, much more than that, in just a short period of time. We want to weed out the corruption. And it seems hard to believe that a judge could say, we don't want you to do that. Well, so maybe we have to look at the judges, because that's a very serious, I think it's a very serious violation.
If a judge does block one of your policies, part of your agenda, will you abide by that ruling? Will you comply?
Well, I always abide by the courts, and then I'll have to appeal it. But then what he's done is he slowed down the momentum, and it gives crooked people more time to cover up the books. You know, if a person's crooked and they get caught, other people see that, and all of a sudden it becomes harder later on. So, yeah, the answer is I always abide by the courts, always abide by them, and will appeal. But appeals take a long time, and I would hope that a judge, if you go into a judge and you show him, here's a corrupt situation, we have a check to be sent, but we found it to be corrupt. Do you want us to send this corrupt check to a person, or do you want us not to give it and give it back to the taxpayer? I would hope a judge would say, don't send it, give it back to the taxpayer.
Yeah, if I can add to that, what we're finding is that a bunch of the fraud is not even going to Americans. So I think we can all agree that if there's going to be fraud, it should at least go to Americans.
What do you think the chances of Trump getting his way there and letting this buyout go through for the 65,000 plus that want it?
I think that Trump is on very solid ground with the buyout. I'm still a bit baffled by what the court is doing here. The presidents are allowed to dictate conditions of employees coming into the office, what they're working on. All of that is part of Article 2 powers of the president controlling the executive branch. I'm not even today certain what the constitutional problem is. You've got 65,000 employees who were told, look, we'll let you stay at home and look for a job as long as you agree to resign in a given number of months. They've agreed to it. The government's agreed to it. That seems to me to be perfectly within the wheelhouse of the president. So I think he's going to win on that.
DOGE has access to U.S. Treasury data. So there's a lot of personal data on there. I saw that 5 former U.S. Treasury secretaries put together an editorial saying you should not let those the other people unelected who aren't Treasury secretaries in there. Where do you think that stands?
I've always suspected that this was always about Elon Musk trying to steal my identity, because I'm the man he always wanted to be.
Right.
But I think that the problem is that Musk is not actually reviewing this material. This is a read-only situation of people that he has selected. It is very hard to deal with inefficiencies and waste unless you can actually see the receipts, actually see what's coming in and going out. Now, there are some legitimate issues here for the court to address. There's the Privacy Act. Data comes with special protections. If you're going to introduce a new data system, there are protections for that too. That would have been worthy of the court to say, look, I'm going to require you to satisfy those conditions. But I think the court really got ahead of its skis here. It went way too far in shutting down Treasury officials from looking at this material. I think that ultimately that can't stand. Now, they may end up with something in the middle. But ultimately, the President of the United States and his designated officials have to look at this material because that's what he does. He runs the executive branch.
USAID worker layoffs. I mean, they're moving ahead with this. They took the name off the building. They cut the lease. They told these people not to come to work. So where's the judge says people will be hurt if this is stopped? Therefore, we're in a pause.
Yeah, see, that's another problem with how these cases are constructed. You know, Congress can make decisions. They're the ones who buy ships, but it is the president that decides who's going to take the ship out and the crew. He can reduce the number of crew members. And so there are different aspects of authority here. And I think that the court is really intruding significantly in the president's authority. He's allowed to downsize, and they're allowed to due process. They're allowed to employment protections, but they're not allowed to permanent employment.
Now, y'all, I agree with Elon Musk. I think these judges need to be impeached when they overstep. Why? Because they have a history of doing things like this. And they also have a history of never facing any penalty when they do it. And we are in a phase, y'all. And I know the apple cart is being overturned. There is an upheaval going on in government where everything we've been taught, everything we've read in history books has been a lie. These people have worked in government to steal our tax dollars, to put us in a situation of servitude, never-ending servitude, to serve their needs. They have stolen the American dream from us. Oh, they live it out to the fullest. They got these great salaries. They got these great benefits that you and I probably can't get in a regular job. They're living the life of Riley, and they say, hey, some of them have come out even recently and said, hey, they offered me 8 months salary to leave the government. I ain't going nowhere. You can't make me go. You can't fire me. You can't do this, that, or the third. I'm here. I'm dug in. I'm staying. These are the people that run the federal government. And I say this all the time. If you follow me for some time, I'm sure you heard me say it. Because we talk about the government as if it's some benign organization. But if you know, like I know, and if you worked in government on several levels as I have, you know that it's real people in there. It's not just a building. It's not just a department. No, it's people in there making decisions. Sometimes those people have a bad day. Sometimes those people have a bad life. Sometimes those people are just bad people. And that's what Donald Trump is facing. So some of these bad people have come out in the form of elected officials. And they are showing themselves under these current circumstances to be the worst of the worst that America has to offer. Makes you wonder, how did these folks even get elected? How do these folks stay in office for so long until they wither on the vine? Can I say it that way? Until they melt away, till they injure themselves, fall down the stairs, break hips, freeze up in front of cameras, all these things. But they won't retire, they won't relinquish power, because it's just that good, y'all.
This court has lost legitimacy. They have burned whatever legitimacy they may still have had after their gun decision, after their voting decision, after their union decision. They just took the last of it and set a torch to it with the Roe versus Wade opinion. I believe we need to get some confidence back in our court, and that means we need more justices on the United States Supreme Court.
And there has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that we, the courts have the legitimacy and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts. It is the justices themselves, through the deeply partisan and unfounded nature of these rulings, that are undermining their own enforcement.
So you're saying the Biden administration should ignore this court, but what does that look like? What does that actually mean?
I think the interesting thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies on enforcement. And it is up to the Biden administration to choose whether or not to enforce such a ruling.
But so it's not ignoring it. It's trying to do it. But let me just understand where you stand. If a district court judge rules in a way that the president dislikes, should the president listen or should the president defy?
If a district court judge tries to usurp the authority of the chief executive of this country, he should absolutely defy it. There's a difference between broad policy decisions and discrete disputes between parties. That's the difference. If I want a policy decided, I'll take it to the
But what
Supreme
about
Court.
checks and balances?
Well, Scott, you're
Of a district court judge who elected
What I
them.
can't get with is you talking in these bizarre, broad generalities.
It's not bizarre.
Every single one of these cases deals with a discrete issue. Okay, it deals with funding. It deals with with certain constitutionally or statutorily appointed roles. Every single one of these things is a distinct thing, and they're all being dealt with by different judges. So it's not broad swaths of policy here. When the court says Congress, appropriated this money, you must unfreeze it while we litigate this. Why can't Trump comply with that?
So you're saying that a judge should decide how and when money is spent
A judge is saying
for years, and not the president of the United
Scott,
States?
Let me explain
You're a governor,
little bit
you
more.
know.
Let me explain it a little bit more slowly. A judge is saying
You don't have to talk to me like that.
Congress.
I have a position on this, and you have an opinion. We can disagree.
Yeah, but I'm saying you listen to me because you're not listening, and you're making claims that are not connected to the facts. The judge is saying
Maybe you are.
Congress appropriated a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
We need to litigate this.
Okay.
While we litigate this, we're going to put a hold on the actions that you took that might be unconstitutional.
So while we
That's
litigate,
part of the process. Why
this,
can't-
I'm
why
a
doesn't
judge
that
and
work?
I'm in charge of the executive branch, and you're not. Forget it.
Yeah,
I totally
you just
disagree.
can't compel the executive branch to spend the dollars. You can't do that. They
Okay.
can't say we're going to start. The
Have
judges
you
are going to
heard
start
of
writing
the
the checks. They have every
impoundment?
right to
Have you
hold that.
heard of the Impoundment Control Act of 1974?
No.
Okay, well, let me play this. Let me play
And by the
this.
way, none of your viewers have
Okay,
either.
well, I'm gonna
can explain it in a
play this clip for you. This is in Congress. Russ Vought, who is the architect of a lot of this, was being questioned in Congress about the Impoundment Control Act, which actually says that the executive branch should spend the money how Congress appropriated it. Here's what he said is going on right now in the federal government.
Do you believe the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 is the law of the land that you must follow?
It is the law of the land. As you know, the president has run on that issue. He believes it's unconstitutional. For 200 years, presidents had the ability to spend less than an appropriation if they could do it for less. And we have seen the extent to which this law has contributed to waste, fraud, and abuse.
So, Ellie, this is the law of the land. They might be wanting to challenge it, but it is the law.
Right. The Impoundment Control Act says essentially the president cannot block money allocated by Congress. To the power of district court judges, and I understand your point, Scott. I understand the frustration people have when a district court judge blocks a broad mandate from the chief executive, the elected chief executive. Ultimately, the big issues go up to the Supreme Court. But I guess I would ask both of you, what if a district court judge had blocked Barack Obama's DACA plan, the Dreamers plan, right? And he said, heck with you, I'm doing it anyway. Would you be okay with that? Or would you have a problem with that?
No,
Would that be okay?
So again, that's where we're forgetting a key piece of the third branch of government. That's where Congress steps in.
Yes.
Right? You have to remember that a judge can't just say, well, I'm going to arbitrarily block something. They say, I'm blocking it because of this, and Congress can step in and be more specific and more refined if they want
Well,
to.
how does that
And-
work with
but how does that-
Congress, who's
right.
appropriated funds for all of these other agencies?
So it can't work
and
that
now,
way.
and
If
now the
Congress
executive branch
appropriates
is
$20
stepping
million
on Congress.
if Congress appropriates $20 million for a program, do you, as the chief executive, do I have to spend $20 million on that program?
Well, this is
but
what
do
I'm
I?
trying to. This is why I
Because
brought.
if I don't,
I know
what's
that
the number?
I know that
Why
the
not do a bit of an
impoundment. Hold on,
investigation into it first?
I know that the
instead of-
Impoundment Control Act thing sounds really wonky, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I understand the idea of testing laws. You want to see how far you can go, but the question that you are asking has been answered by the courts, okay? The reason that the Impoundment Control Act exists is to say that when Congress says we appropriate this money, it should be spent that way. That's
No.
their power. They have the
Look,
power
every
of the
state in the
purse.
country, when we pass a balanced budget, and I'll explain what a balanced budget is
Again,
to everyone
it's
in
a
Washington in a minute.
dispute, but I'm
we don't
saying
spend this
that
called a
hasn't
lapse.
been proven
There's
in the
hundreds of millions of dollars in New Hampshire that intentionally do not get spent on certain programs.
What
They're
about
supposed to lapse
what
back
about
into
when the
system.
Trump administration says to Congress, "You created this agency. We're going to just decide it doesn't exist anymore."
He runs the executive branch. He can decide who works for the executive branch.
So where
He
does
can
this
decide who
where does
doesn't.
this end? So
It doesn't.
Congress creates an agency. The executive says, "To heck with it." Congress appropriates money. The executive branch says, to heck with it. Where does this end?
So it ends. You can go back, and I like what they're doing, and they're going to whiteboard these programs out, and they're going to force each of these departments to come back and actually justify their existence, which no one in Washington has done for decades. If you want NIH money to go forward, explain to me why, how, and how it's going to be spent.
All right, so the next
That's all. They're
Democratic
going to
president
force
who
them to the
says
table.
ICE is going to just disappear, I expect that the two of you will say that sounds.
And there you have it, y'all. The talking heads are talking as usual. But the people that we have elected to represent us in the legislature, in Congress, these people are also coming out talking, and they're making, especially the blackity blacks, they are making fools of themselves in front of the cameras. Makes me a little bit ashamed, even as I report on it, that these people are not self-aware, that these people are not beholden to the people who even put them in office. But here we are, y'all, in 2025, watching this new president and the first buddy put things into place that are going to expose it all to us. And we are going to be left here to have these conversations that we have here on this channel. But we're going to talk about it because we're going to need to discuss it. Y'all might need some therapy after you figure out how corrupt your government has been, after you figure out what your government has been spending your tax dollars on. Not just in recent times, but for your entire life. I've told y'all before, I got my first W-2 job when I was 13 years old. I've been paying into the tax system ever since. And to hear some of these reports and find out what this government has been doing with our tax dollars for all this time, for all of my life, infuriates me. I'm ready to tell Donald Trump and the first buddy, do what you got to do. Crawl through all of those records, expose it all. We want to know. Because an informed citizen is an informed voter. Yeah, I live in a state where some people who are not citizens been voting. I know they don't want to let y'all know that. They don't want to admit that, but it's the truth. That's why Donald Trump says, hey, I can fix LA. I know y'all burnt it down on purpose, but I can send some federal funds down there and we can get it fixed. However, I'm going to need you to implement voter ID. Why would he say a thing like that? Because he know folks been voting that shouldn't be voting in my state. You talk about a constitutional crisis. Yes, there is one. Not only in my state, but in other states across the country. Donald Trump will tell you, yeah, I won those swing states. I won by a large margin. People want me to do this. Yes, we want you to do it, but there are still some things happening on a state level, especially in my state, that we need the federal government to intervene in, that we need the federal government to step in and rescue us as citizens. Because the state is so corrupt that they have stolen our voice. And people in other states think, I talk to people all over the country, y'all. They think that people in California is crazy. No, there are plenty of people in California who are right thinking and right voting. But things are so rigged up in this state, in this situation, that our voices are being drowned out by the voice of corruption. So you take that level of corruption and you expand it. You scale it to the point of a nation, a country, and you say, wow, this level of corruption has permeated the federal government to the point where people have set up complicated schemes to siphon your money and send it all over the world in a boomerang situation where I can send it out and then it'll come right back. And you have people like the best buddy, Elon Musk, saying, hey, your salary is $175,000 a year as a congressman, as a senator. How are you worth $200 million? Where did that money come from? Well, I need you, first buddy, first friend. I need you to look into it. I need you to send those brainiacs like Big Balls. I don't know if y'all saw this, but on the X platform, Elon Musk changed his handle, changed his username to Harry Balls just to get people on the news to say it. It's the funniest thing ever. Because they can't help but report on it. But when you report on Elon, you got to say Harry Balls. Y'all say it with me. Harry Balls. But that's what we're dealing with in this constitutional crisis. Well, it wouldn't have been a constitutional crisis had these Democrats who have been in power for the last 4 years had not sold out the American people. That's right, y'all. They sold you out. They sold out the country. And when they knew that they lost the election as of November 5th, they did everything they could to sabotage it. If you follow me on this channel, you heard me say it. They're going to start so many fires that when Donald Trump gets in there, he's going to be busy trying to put out the fires that they started. Well, here we are. But I'm so glad that Donald Trump was prepared for it. I'm so glad that he had that alternative remote White House down at Mar-a-Lago, and he was meeting with his team leading up to inauguration and saying, hey, we got to get ahead of it. We know what they did. We know they sabotaged us. We know they want us to lose. And we are going to take steps to put people in place and build a team that can go in there on day one and get things done. That's why we are less than 1 month into this administration and we are seeing positive results. But this here constitutional crisis, nah, you see these Democrats running to the courts as their last refuge to try to save them before the American people find out what they've been doing for our entire lives. We know what it is. Y'all, they've been robbing us. They've been stealing from us. They've been pillaging and stealing the American dream right before our eyes. You out there struggling? Yeah, they're not. Your eggs are so expensive, you can't afford to eat them anymore. They don't care. They send their servants down to the grocery store. They haven't even been in the grocery store for years. They don't know what the cost of butter is. They don't know what the cost of chicken is. They send their servants to do that petty work while they extract from the government with these complicated schemes. Well, I'm so glad that Elon has put his people into place. I'm so glad for Doge. I'm so glad for President Trump allowing them to do their thing and go from department to department to department. Expose it all. Fix it all. That's why we voted for you. That's why we're glad you're there. So let a constitutional crisis be. We're here for it because we voted for it. Y'all let me know what you think about this in the comments. I'd love to know your thoughts, and don't forget to like the video. Subscribe to the channel and share the video so we can get more people involved in the conversation, y'all. And like I always say, always remember and never forget, without the gospel, it's just chops. Until next time, peace.